Nicholas Miller always dreamed of living a life of luxury. Growing up in a small, poor town, he would spend hours watching TV shows about rich people with glamorous lives. He hated the struggles of his own family, where money was always tight, and he promised himself that one day he would escape poverty no matter what it took. By the time he turned 25, Nicholas had mastered the art of charm. He knew how to make people like him with sweet words, compliments, and flattery. He believed his good looks and smooth-talking skills were his ticket to a better life. His plan was simple: find someone wealthy to marry and live a carefree, rich life without having to work hard. One evening, Nicholas attended a fancy charity event in downtown Los Angeles. He wasn't supposed to be there. It was an exclusive event, and he had barely scraped together the money to rent a tuxedo and get in. But he knew this was the kind of place where he could meet rich, influential people. As he sipped champagne and looked around the grand ballroom, his eyes landed on a woman who immediately caught his attention. Her name was Victoria Hathaway. She was in her late 60s, a widow, and rumored to be worth millions. She wore a flowing lavender gown and carried herself with elegance and grace. Her silver hair was styled neatly in a bun, and although her face showed signs of age, there was something warm and kind about her smile. Nicholas noticed that many of the younger men at the party kept their distance from Victoria. They probably thought it would look strange to flirt with someone so much older, but Nicholas didn't care. To him, she wasn't just an older woman. She was an opportunity. He approached her confidently, flashing his best practiced smile. "Good evening," he said, bowing slightly. "I'm Nicholas Miller. May I say, you look absolutely stunning tonight, Miss Hathaway." Victoria smiled graciously. "Why, thank you, Mr. Miller. That's very kind of you. Please call me Victoria." Nicholas offered his hand. "Would you care to dance?" Victoria hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'd be delighted." As they danced across the ballroom floor, Nicholas showered her with compliments. He praised her beauty, her elegant style, and her charity work. Victoria, who had been feeling lonely since her husband's passing years ago, found Nicholas's attention flattering. She hadn't felt this special in a long time. Over the next few weeks, Nicholas worked hard to win Victoria's heart. He took her out to expensive dinners, putting the bills on his credit card, brought her flowers, and always treated her with care and respect. Victoria began to feel younger when she was around him. She hadn't expected to fall for someone so much younger, but Nicholas made her feel loved and appreciated. 6 months later, Nicholas decided it was time to take the next step. He rented out a small garden, decorated it with roses, and got down on one knee with a diamond ring. The ring had cost him a fortune, but he didn't care. To him, it was an investment in his future. "Victoria," he said, looking up at her with what he hoped was a sincere expression, "you've made me the happiest man in the world. Will you marry me?" Victoria was taken aback. The age difference between them was significant, and she knew people would talk. But Nicholas insisted, "Love knows no boundaries. I don't care what anyone thinks. I just want to spend my life with you." Tears filled Victoria's eyes as she said yes. She longed for companionship and happiness, and Nicholas seemed to offer both. The wedding planning was quick and extravagant. Nicholas made sure every detail catered to Victoria's romantic side. The ceremony would take place in an open-air chapel decorated with pastel flowers, candlelit aisles, and a string quartet. Victoria trusted him completely, and since she believed in love, she didn't ask for a prenuptial agreement. Finally, the wedding day arrived. The weather was perfect, with a gentle breeze blowing through the air. The chapel was filled with white blossoms and golden ribbons, and the guests whispered about how beautiful everything looked. Victoria walked down the aisle in a simple but elegant wedding dress, her silver hair shining in the sunlight. Nicholas waited for her at the altar, wearing a perfectly tailored suit and a charming smile. But inside, Nicholas was impatient. He couldn't wait to sign the marriage papers and finally secure his future. As Victoria reached the altar, he took her hands and smiled, thinking to himself, "This is it. My life of luxury begins now." The ceremony continued smoothly. They exchanged vows, and Nicholas slipped the ring onto Victoria's finger. The officiant then announced, "You may kiss the bride." Nicholas leaned in, but as he got closer, his eyes landed on something that made his heart stop. On Victoria's left shoulder, just near her collarbone, was a small birthmark shaped like a crescent moon. It seemed oddly familiar. His mind raced. Where had he seen that shape before? Then, like a bolt of lightning, a memory from his childhood struck him. He remembered overhearing a conversation between his adoptive parents when he was about 6 years old. They had been talking about his birth mother. One detail stood out. They said she had a crescent-shaped birthmark on her left shoulder. Nicholas felt a wave of nausea. Could Victoria be his birth mother? He had always assumed his birth mother was someone poor and far away, not a wealthy widow in Los Angeles. But the birthmark was identical. The realization made him dizzy. Victoria noticed his hesitation. "Nicholas, are you all right?" she whispered. Concern filled her face. Nicholas forced a shaky smile and kissed her quickly on the cheek instead of the lips. The ceremony ended with awkward applause, and Nicholas could feel the eyes of the guests on him. He tried to stay calm, but inside he was panicking. At the reception, Nicholas pulled Victoria aside. "We need to talk," he said, his voice trembling. They went into a quiet room away from the guests. "What's wrong?" Victoria asked, worried. Nicholas hesitated, his heart pounding. How could he say this? But he needed to know the truth. "Your birthmark," he said finally. "The crescent shape on your shoulder. Have you always had it?" Victoria frowned. "Yes, since I was born." "Why?" Nicholas swallowed hard. I was adopted as a baby. My adoptive parents told me my birth mother had a birthmark just like that. A crescent moon on her left shoulder." Victoria's eyes widened, and she covered her mouth with her hand. Tears filled her eyes. "Nicholas, are you saying—" "I think you might be my biological mother," he said, his voice breaking. Victoria stumbled back, her mind racing. Memories of her past came flooding back. When she was 16, she had given up her baby boy for adoption because she was too young and poor to care for him. She had spent her entire life trying to forget the pain of that decision, but now it was all coming back. "Oh my God," she whispered. "When I was a teenager, I had to give up my baby. I never saw him again. Could it really be you?" Nicholas sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "That means this marriage, this wedding." He couldn't finish the sentence. The weight of what had happened was too much to bear. Victoria began to cry. "I had no idea," she said. "All these years, I thought I'd lost my son forever. And now—" She covered her face with her hands. "Now I've married him. This is horrible." At that moment, the door opened, and a few guests peeked in. They saw the bride and groom crying and looking upset. Whispers started to spread. Nicholas stood up and faced the guests. "The wedding is off," he said loudly. "I'm sorry. We can't stay." The guests were confused, but they could see the pain on his face. Victoria ran out of the room, tears streaming down her face. Nicholas left in the opposite direction, too ashamed to explain. The next day, rumors spread like wildfire. Some said Nicholas was a con artist. Others whispered about a scandal too dark to imagine, but no one guessed the real truth. Nicholas disappeared, staying in a cheap motel far away. He couldn't sleep, haunted by guilt and shame. Meanwhile, Victoria locked herself in her mansion, heartbroken. She found her son's adoption papers and confirmed what she already knew. Nicholas was her child. Months later, Victoria received a letter from Nicholas. He apologized deeply, saying he never meant to hurt her. He wrote that he was leaving the country to start over and wished her peace. He signed it, "Your son." Victoria cried as she read the letter. Though she couldn't forgive what had happened, she prayed Nicholas would find redemption. From that day on, no one saw Nicholas again. Victoria lived a quiet life, dedicating herself to charity work. The story of their tragic wedding faded from the public eye, but in some circles, people still whispered about the man who accidentally married his own mother. It was a secret neither of them could ever escape. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more compelling tales.